Hey everyone, it's Adam James here with Edward Littlejohn. Edward and I got to know each other a few years back, and we were on the phone a few weeks ago, and we just felt there's a need right now for some hope and inspiration. And in today's world, no matter what news media station you turn on or what political spectrum you're on, everything seems to be fear-based. So Edward and I share a lot of commonalities and similar beliefs, and we just wanted to pour hope back into the marketplace. We know that business owners, entrepreneurs, folks in sales, and quite frankly, folks in all areas of life are struggling. And in our own businesses, in our own lives, we've been doing things to try to innovate and disrupt and pour hope into ourselves. So this is our opportunity, we feel, to give back and to serve and to help. And we simply want to be a voice for inspiration right now. So Edward is with Littlejohn Law up in Steubenville, Ohio, and I'll let him share a little bit about himself, and it's just going to be an open dialogue between us, and we're going to have some fun today.
Well, thanks, Adam. I really appreciate you doing this call. Like you said, I think it's important for us to put some hope back in the world. What I've seen in the last couple of weeks, or I could say at least in the last month, as running a law firm, we face a unique set of challenges, right? Nobody wants to leave their house to come in. My law firm, we primarily focus on real estate, business, and estate planning. And so we had to figure out, how do we adapt? You're in a stay-at-home order, right? Yes, there's a problem, but where's the opportunity? What is the opportunity, right? And so I've been reading this book. It's called The Obstacle is the Way. Can't remember who authored it, but it talks about, look, the obstacle, there's your opportunity. And so that's what we started looking at. How do we adapt? How do we overcome in this situation? I think the business world, or at least the business community as a whole, we're looking for leadership, right? And that's why I really appreciate you jumping on this call with me, because people need leadership. They need to know how to deal with this kind of situation. In my experience, just talking with other small businesses, I think there's like kind of three different types of business owners. There's the fear-based, where it's like, oh, the world's coming to an end. And then there's kind of like an ignorant one, where they're like, hey, everything will be okay. But then there's the strategic one. And I think that's where it's important to be at, the strategic one, right? This is the new economy. How do we adapt? How do we overcome? And I think that's what people need kind of more of.
Yeah, I love that. How do we overcome? So in your world, obviously you're in a different situation than I am in my business, in that you have folks who are relying on you for a paycheck to put food on the table for their family. So as a leader of Littlejohn Law and within your community, what specifically have you done to promote positivity in your environment, so when your customers are coming to you, or even your employees, they feel like, we're going to get through this, we can make it to the other side?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. One of the things that we had implemented probably sometime last year was weekly team meetings. And so we do a weekly team meeting every Monday morning for about an hour, half an hour to an hour. And then I also prepare like a little one-page, here's what the focus is going to be on for the week. And it's some sort of inspirational piece. When the COVID-19 originally hit, I reached out to everybody and said, look, my job is to take care of my family, but also to help you take care of your family, right? I'm going to do everything possible to make sure that everyone stays employed, right? And what I ask that you do is be willing to adapt, right? If you've been a paralegal and all you've been doing is kind of legal work, right? How do we adapt so that you can help us out with some marketing so that we can get some new clients? The other thing that we did was the shift focus, right? We couldn't do a lot of legal work. And so what we focused on was, how do we fill our buckets full of prospective clients so that when the dam falls, we're ready to rock and roll. And so we've just been focusing on fill the bucket. And so that's what we've been doing, kind of adapting.
I love that, Edward. That's so awesome. And how have your team members, have they bought in overall? Do you feel?
Yeah, I feel that they bought in. they've been really receptive to everything. The other thing is I got some computer stuff so that we could work remotely if the need arose. So yeah, I think they bought in, and I think they've seen that it's really not what we, but it's how we do it, right? And we can really make a better impact by one becoming better technicians, but also spending some time to identify our ideal and perfect clients that we want to work with.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. I think culture, a lot of organizations, both, small and large, talk about how culture drives their organization and how important it is. And inevitably, every company has a mission, a set of core values, and a vision. But I believe that during these times, organizations that have strong cultures end up standing out, because these moments allow cultures to become defined even greater, in that, how the leader steps up in these moments to take care of their people is instrumental in how they feel connected to the overall mission that you're fighting for. And it sounds like, it didn't happen by accident. I asked the second question to the follow-up as to how have your people bought in, because I'm sure there are organizations all over the world where they tried to implement new policies and procedures and there wasn't a buy-in. So kudos to you for the work that you've done on the front end during non-pandemic, because I think that's what's allowed you all to adapt. And, innovation, while we're on the topic of adaptation, you said something to me a few weeks ago when we were talking, Edward, about businesses are being exposed right now. And
yes.
innovation is such a buzzword in today's world. Doesn't matter what industry. When you think about innovation with Littlejohn Law, like, what are you said you got them set up on remote equipment. I know you mentioned to me a little bit about just the video capabilities now and interfacing with clients. Is there anything else that in your own business you're like, wow, we've been talking about innovation, but we haven't really executed, and now we're executing on it?
Yeah, I mean, what I can tell you, we one of the goals that I wanted to do this year was to do more video consultations, right? And so COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to engage in these video consultations. The other thing that we didn't do a lot of that I wanted to do, at least this year, we set out and said, hey, we're going to do some more Facebook. We're going to do some more social media marketing. And so we started to do that because I said, hey, we're in the middle of COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't coming in the door. They're sitting at home on their phones, right? And we're not taking advantage of this opportunity. So we started putting some content out on social media, different things about estate planning, different things about businesses, trying to do some community, engagement, even though it's just online. And one of the things that I realized, or at least that I saw, is that everybody's doing stuff online. Everybody's doing social media, which made me say, hey, we got to double down on what was working before. We send out like some direct mail letters. We do a monthly newsletter. And so what we said is, hey, how do we make the content in this newsletter even better? How do we send out more letters to, prospective clients so that they know we're here? Because I think that's what people want to know. They want to know that, is Littlejohn here, Littlejohn Law here? And are they going to be around after the pandemic's over, right? Are they going to be able to serve us? And so that's what we've been trying to do, is double down on what I feel has worked over the years. Because like the social media for us, it was something that people, like I've had assistants over the years, and everybody said, you need to get on Facebook, you need to do this. And I said, oh, we don't want to do that. Let's just build relationships with our herd, right? Let's build this kind of community that the basically bring people into the Littlejohn Law world, and put a fence around them and let them know, hey, we're here for you. And so we kind of just been doubling down on that. But as far as the innovation, like I said, we've been trying to use technology to bring the video consultation, which is huge, because the other day, and actually while we were on the talking to each other, actually a couple days before we started talking to each other, it hit me. Why can't we have consultations over the entire state, right? Because the legal industry as a whole has been, I guess the word, immune to any change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lawyers have been practicing law the same way for the last 150 years.
Yeah.
You go to court, you sit, you wait, and this is truly an opportunity to disrupt the legal world. I think a couple weeks ago, the Supreme Court, they did an oral argument over the phone. You know what I mean?
Wow.
They've never done that before. You've always had to drive into the court. And
Yeah.
so, this opportunity is just huge.
Right.
Huge.
That's awesome stuff. And it's inevitably forcing some people out of their comfort zone. But as you and I
Yeah.
both know, some folks are going to revert back to where they're comfortable. And I love what you're doing in your business and in your life, just knowing how you're consistently willing to try things that is far out of your comfort zone. And I believe that when the pandemic settles, Littlejohn Law is going to be set up to perform in this space. But I don't believe that you're going to revert back to old habits. I really believe, just knowing you, that you're going to be more efficient and effective because of your willingness to sustain the uncomfortable feelings. And that's what I worry about right now, that there are some valuable lessons being learned through coronavirus, just in how it is that we treat people, right? And the value of a hug and the value of being able to shake someone's hand. And I'm afraid that when this all ends and things normalize, that people are going to forget the potential lessons that were learned, both personally and in business. And, I've come to respect your disciplines, Edward, that, you have. I know I've certainly got some in my own life, and journaling for me is one of those things that keep me out of my comfort zone, that forces me to, stay uncomfortable, to stay in a place where I'm growing so that I don't stagnate. And I'm just curious if there's anything in your personal life that you can share with the viewers about what it is that you do to force yourself to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know journaling is something I do consistently to be uncomfortable. Um, I, I don't know. That's a great question, Adam. What I do know is, like, I would say maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I opened up one of the old journals. I keep it by my bed. It's I guess more personal stuff than my daily journal. And I got so many journals, but this one that just sits by my bed.
My man.
And I opened it up to two years ago, and I said, "What was life like 2 years ago?"
Yeah.
And the interesting thing was, I had made a journal entry in April of 2018 and said, "You know what? Things have been slow. Things are drying up. Haven't had any new calls." And then I made a journal entry. I read fast forward to June. It's been almost 2 months, no new calls. Right? What are we gonna do? In this pandemic. And so when I was writing in this journal, I said, you know what? I've been here before, right? I know how to adapt and overcome. And so what did we do 2 years ago to survive that instance? We can do that now, right? And so that's what I'd say. The only thing that I've tried to do is kind of reflect more. But to answer your question, what have I done to be uncomfortable? Man,
Well,
that's a
just
great
stay in a
question.
place of uncomfortable, because we're human, and it happens to me too, where like, I think, and I'll share a little bit about my story later. But when I started my speaking business, I was 23. I had no fancy diplomas, no degrees, and I completely jumped into the deep end, gave up a steady paycheck, and I fell face first and was failing miserably. But I was so uncomfortable, and I was willing to endure. And in my own life, I'm always looking for ways to get me out of my comfort zone, to challenge me to stay in a place of uncertainty. And I was just curious what routines that you had, if any, that force you to stay uncomfortable. Like, one thing for me, at the end of every day, I ask myself, what actions did I take to get out of my comfort zone? that is a
Mm,
strategic step that forces me to think about throughout the course of my day. I know that question's going to be there at the end of the day awaiting me. It's going to be there. I mean,
right.
it's there at the end of every day. So if I just go through the motions every day and don't stretch myself, if I don't pick up the phone to make that dreaded call, or if I don't send that email I've been waiting on, or if I don't go to an event that maybe I'm comfortable going to, you know, then I am doing myself a disservice. And sometimes it can relate
Right.
to working out. I've begun running again more recently, and I'm constantly trying to, if I can just take 2 seconds off a mile. Not a very fast guy by any means, but it's just that idea of of stretching, of being uncomfortable. And I think, again, what I'm trying to help our viewers, whoever tunes in, to find, or maybe some tangible practices they can say, hey, you know what, I've been uncomfortable through this pandemic. How can I stay certain that when it ends, I'm going to stay uncomfortable so that I don't revert back to old habits?
Sure. And I would say the only thing I do is really set goals, right? And I just try to set goals that I don't know that I can reach, I mean, that maybe these unreachable, unbelievable goals. And every time I set them, we start moving, like the pieces just start coming together, right?
Mhm.
And so that's what I'd say. I just consistently set goals, short-term goals, long-term goals, um, and just put in the work. But
Yeah.
that's what I'd say. And to add to that, I'd say I set a goal, a short-term goal, tell my wife what the goal is, and she says that's unrealistic, and that's how I know I'm moving in the right direction.
I love it, Edward. I love it. Sometimes you have to be bold like that, though, right? I read a
Yeah.
story years back about Steve Jobs, how when he was running Apple, he had all of his software engineers and data scientists and product developers and so forth. Of course, he was running the organization. So not only was he creating the culture within the organization, but he was the visionary behind the iPhones, the iPads, etc. And one of the things that he always did is he would put these grandiose visions out there, these big ideas that most people on the surface would say, that's impossible. You're going to create this, and
Yeah.
how are we going to do that? But his idea behind it was, if I set this goal that seems out of reach for everyone, and to 99.9% of people, it seems unrealistic. At minimum, I'm going to get my people to work tirelessly to find a solution to try to solve this problem. And even if we fall a little short, we still end up with something like this. And
Right, right.
and so, to your point, I love that idea that you just said. I tell my wife what the goal is, and if she says it's unrealistic, I know I'm on the right track.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, whatever. I mean, it's, I mean, I can tell you it's kind of weird, but I mean, that's just as I said, look, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And she's, oh man, so
Yeah.
that's kind of, cause my wife, she just always wants to keep me grounded, right? And what's real. And that's
Sure.
a lot of people that love you, they want to do that. Right. And
Sure.
so, especially in this pandemic, right? A lot of people that love, other business owners, they may say, hey, you don't need to take advantage of this opportunity. There are so many opportunities. There are opportunities to just stay in contact with, everybody. There's employment opportunities, right? Before the pandemic, I mean, everybody had good jobs, right? Now people are displaced and they're looking for good jobs. So there's a hiring opportunity,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, there, I just think that this call is really good because we see the opportunities, but I don't know that everybody sees the opportunities. And so I would ask you, Adam, what is something that somebody could do so that they're more optimistic, right? More focused on the opportunity as opposed to being negative, right?
Yeah. Great question. I think one thing that's been helpful for me is not allowing a situation to define you. When
Mm,
I still incur incredible amounts of failure, and you know I've begun separating myself years ago from the outcome of situations, if you will. And I think when this pandemic arose, business owners got very reactive, entrepreneurs got very reactive, people in general got very reactive. People were losing their jobs, and it's easy when you're facing financial adversity, especially, to allow it to define your being. Like all of a sudden you don't have enough money to pay your bills and you can't take care of your family and you feel like a failure, and you just feel like this circumstance is life altering and defining. But that's only a small part of our lives. So I would say, to answer your question, what can people do to maintain optimism, if you will, if I understood what you were asking right, is not be defined by coronavirus or any adverse situation that comes even in the future. We have to work up the courage to define it, to look for the meaning behind what is happening. There's an old adage that Tony Robbins, I think, was coined as saying that, life doesn't happen to you, but for you. And that takes a lot of courage to adopt that mentality, because again, most people live in this victim mentality. Most people live in this place of, gosh, why me? Why did this have to happen to me? I've worked 20, 30, 40 years to grow this business, and now coronavirus hits. Why me? Well, my question to myself is always, how am I going to get better as a result of this? How can I ensure that this doesn't define me? At the end of our lives, when we're 100 years old and we're going to breathe our last breath, I don't believe we're going to think back to when we were in 2020 and say, gosh, I'm such a failure because my business didn't make as much money during coronavirus. No, we're going to look back in those moments as, how did we continue to enjoy life and add value to the lives of others in spite of coronavirus? And even if our businesses took a hit, even if we took personal financial hits, what did we do to ensure that it didn't define us, so that we could pivot, adjust, and adapt to start a new business, to start a new venture, to grow our current businesses? Because there's always opportunity, but I don't think people take advantage of it, because once they fail once, it's like they're just too afraid. So the short answer, now that I've made a long-winded answer, is, don't be defined and label yourself off of a circumstance.
Wow, that's great. Don't be defined. That's it's good stuff, Adam.
Well,
Because I think you're right. People, like you said, businesses, they became very reactive, and that people have this victim mentality, right? It's just poor me. You know what I mean? This happened to me, and just to piggyback off of that, what I realized is that because COVID-19 exposed so many weaknesses, it also presented an opportunity to accomplish the 2020 goals, right?
Yeah.
For me, I set some crazy 2020 goals. I said, how are we going to get there?
Yeah.
And COVID-19 has presented an opportunity, right?
Yes.
We can do video consultations. Now
Yeah.
we can do those across the world, or at least across the state. And people are willing. I think COVID-19, at least in my business, it's helped because people are truly willing to consult with a lawyer, and they know they're not going to sit in front of them. Right?
Yeah.
Before this, the expectation was, I'm going to hire a lawyer and walk into the office. Now that expectation isn't there.
Yeah.
And so I think that same opportunity is across the board in every business, because one of my mentors, his name's Ben Glass, he said money moves in all economies.
Yeah.
And that's what we're experiencing. Money is just moving, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not moving the way it used to, but it moves in all economies.
Yeah.
And so we have to adapt. So I really appreciate that. When you fail the first time, don't give up, right?
That's right.
When you fail the second time, don't give up, right? That's very powerful.
Well, yeah, and beyond that, the don't give up is don't let it define you. We live in this social media age now, and everyone's got to keep up with the Joneses, it seems, and everyone, I don't know about your social media feed, but it seems like people, there's filters on everything, and we're only seeing an abbreviated version of someone's life. No one's posting the trials and the tribulations. And that's why I try to bring adversity. It's like, I've been authentic with people, and that, hey, I've slept in my car, and it took a while for me to admit that to people, because what are people going to think about me? Here I was with a college education, and I was making a full salary job, when I was out of college, and all of a sudden I quit. Now I'm sleeping in my car. I can't share that with anyone. But the reality is that the more vulnerable we are, the more connectivity there is, and the more trust that is built. So I believe, when going back to your initial question of, how can people maintain optimism and so forth during these times, the not defining yourself based off of it is very hard, because we're constantly having to compete, we feel, with others. But what I would challenge people to do is to admit their shortcomings, which, when you talk about
Mm,
leadership, which I know is one of the things we wanted to talk about today, I believe that is a key quality and an absolute essential component of effective leadership: highlighting your own flaws. When you can say, I
yes.
screwed up, it's my mistake, it humanizes situations. So that if, I'm working for you at Littlejohn Law, and you tell, the team or me that you screwed up, or you made a mistake, that breaks down any barriers or perceived barriers that there may be to you, so that it ultimately empowers me to make mistakes in my own role. And I
Right.
feel that because of this era of social media, and this competitiveness that we feel we have to have the nicer house or the nicer car than our neighbor, et cetera, et cetera, people are so afraid of that failure. And when it comes, they're defined by it because of what it will look like. And then they never keep trying. They never stay out of their comfort zone. So I don't know what really sparked that thought for me, but I love your question, because I think it's one that, if we can grasp and truly hold on to as a society right now, we'll be better off for it. And that optimism is essential, to keep going.
Right. And I think you hit the nail right on the head, Adam, right? Don't let it define you.
Yes.
Because like you said, it can't, right? It can't, right? Your dreams are your dreams for your dreams, right? They're meant for you. Everything that's meant for you is meant for you. Everything that's meant for me is meant for me. And what, like you said, social media, it adds this component where you think what I look at you and say, oh, well, Adam's doing this, so I want to go do that. And that's really not what's in my heart. It's what's in your
Yeah.
heart. I remember back when I was in undergrad, right? I was enjoying life to the fullest. You know how that undergrad life
Of
is, Adam.
course.
You know,
Yeah, man.
I mean, I'm enjoying the life to the fullest. And I mean, at one point in time, I get pushed on academic probation. And they sent a letter home to my parents, and they let them know, look, if he doesn't get a 1.5 GPA, he's got to go home. And I'm like, that's awfully low to have to get a 1.5 GPA. And so I told them I can do it. And I fought and I clawed, and what I mean, that was my sophomore, my freshman semester, my first semester of my sophomore year. And I fought and I clawed out. And I said, you know what? I've always wanted to be a lawyer, so I'm going to go ahead and be a lawyer. And I fought to get like a decent 2.5, maybe 2.6 GPA.
Hmm.
And I go to my professor, who was also my academic advisor. And this is something that just continues to motivate me today. And I asked her, I said, hey, will you write me a letter of recommendation? Because I'm trying to get into law school.
Hmm.
And she looked at me and she said, you should just go be a paralegal. And I said, no, but I want to be a lawyer. She said, well, it'll only take you 18 months to become a paralegal. It'll take you 3 years to become a lawyer. And I said, no, but I want to be a lawyer. And she's like, just go, I'll write the recommendation. I said, well, I don't want you to write one for the paralegal program, write it for the
Yeah.
law school program.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so she refused to do that, you know? And so she refused to write it. my rejection letters started coming in for law school. I mean, Adam, it got so bad. I'm getting rejection letters from schools I didn't even apply to. You know what I mean? They just said boom. And I said, you know what? I got to fight through this, right? I got to fight through this. And I finally got into, a school. And I never let anything define me. And I think that's critical. Like
Yeah.
you said, don't let anything define you. When I got to law school, they told me that, you know what, maybe I needed some remedial courses because maybe I had some, reading disability, and that it probably would take me more time. And I said, look, I'm not going to let that define me.
That's
You know
right.
what I mean? And so I've never let anything define me. And what I want to say to people is don't let COVID-19 define you, right?
Mm.
You should define COVID-19. Let this year, 2020, be a year to remember, not a year to forget.
Yeah.
People say, well, we've had the pandemic. You see all these protests, riots. This is all in the first half of 2020. My question is, how great is the second half going to be, Adam? You know what I mean? Because it's 6 months left.
Yes.
Like, what can we do in the next 6 months to make 2020 unforgettable? Yeah, so that's what I would like to say. I think you hit, as leaders, we have to make sure that the team's inspired, make sure that they're not defined, right? Make sure one of the things, and I love it that you said to me, I think 2 or 3 years ago, make sure the team is connected to the vision,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that's important. But 2020, I want people to know that this is probably going to be your best year ever if you're willing to put in the work.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you're willing to put in the work. And on a total side note, I know we're on the thing. Did you get to see the Michael Jordan Last Dance?
I did. Yes. Yeah, it was awesome, man.
Right. That's what I'm saying. And that's why I say it's kind of a side note, but it's not, because Mike forced everybody to be great.
Yes.
Yes. And
he had a relentlessness. He hated to lose, and it wasn't based in this. It wasn't based in this all about me mentality, because if you see, he actually seemed like he really cared about people. Like, he was hard on his teammates, but you saw him. They always said he signed all the balls. There was one scene where he was stopped in the middle of the road signing a kid's basketball. So I don't think, Michael Jordan, to your point, he didn't strike me as, like he's working to impress others. He was working because he hated to lose. And he was just a fierce competitor who was relentless. And I love Edward. Going back, I don't want to get lost in this. I feel like I want to clip out, like, from when you started of talking about your academic advisor in college to right when you brought up the Last Dance, because that was a powerful segment, those 2-3 minutes. And I think people need to hear exactly what you said, because how many of us have been told that we can't do something, and then we just allow it to define us. I never knew that. You've never shared that story with me, actually, about your academic advisor being unwilling to write a recommendation for you, and then actually recommending that you become a paralegal. And I actually feel for those type of people, Edward, because I don't know if you recall, I told you my 8th grade principal told me I'd be lucky to graduate high school. And, I've shared that story with so many folks, and some are obviously like, I can't believe someone would say that. And then others were like, well, maybe she was saying it to, give you some fuel to keep going. And it's like, you should never say that to anyone, right? There's other ways to motivate. And the fact that people, can you still see me? It's saying my internet connection is.
I can see you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. The fact that people say those things to others are a telltale sign that we will always need what you and I are trying to do right now. And that is pour hope into people. Because what happens too often in life is people get filled up with their own animosity, their own failures, their own pain, their own frustrations. And because life has beaten them down, they feel like it is their duty to try to keep others safe. And as a result of trying to keep others safe, they tell them that they can't, that you shouldn't try. And I think that's BS, to be honest, because, you know,
Oh,
your life could have completely changed as a result of that. There would be no Littlejohn
yeah,
Law today had you given in to her. There would be, you wouldn't be, helping people feed their families who are employed by you today if you would have given in to her. You and I would not be here today if you had allowed her to define you. And I think I just wanted to package that for anyone who may be viewing this, because we all get told things, we all face adversity, but I believe it's what we do with those things that we're told that make all the difference. And it sounds like, I know for me, I've packaged the naysayers into a part of my why. It is the thing that
yeah,
fuels me and keeps me going. It's not the only part of my why, because I believe it can't be something that's rooted in a self-serving type of way to just, prove others wrong. But I believe that it's our responsibility to take all the pain that we've gone through and use that to fuel us to push forward. And thank you for sharing that vulnerable piece, man, because,
yeah.
you know,
And I think the reason you have never heard it before is because I haven't been vulnerable. You know what I mean? I'd say the last year, I've been more vulnerable and sharing it more frequently,
I love
because I wasn't comfortable sharing it. Right? Because, like you said, we got social media, we got all of this stuff, and as a leader, I've been trying to be more vulnerable to my team, and just more vulnerable to the world, right? Because I'm human.
yes.
Everybody thinks I'm Superman. I'm human. I'm
No,
just human.
Edward, that's awesome, man. And kudos to you, because that takes true courage. I think vulnerability, again, it just creates trust, because, you're showing your human side. And I think some of the most effective leaders today are those who are willing to be vulnerable. There's the old adage of work your strengths and hire your weaknesses comes to mind when I think about leadership. And then there's an old quote by Einstein that I might have shared with you before. He says, "We're all geniuses, but if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it will go around its whole life believing it's stupid." And why I share that as it relates to leadership is I think sometimes you get these ego-driven leaders who aren't willing to be vulnerable, who don't see the skill sets of their people internally. They think that only they are able to accomplish X, Y, or Z, and if they have a deficiency, they they feel like they can't highlight it. But for me, I know my weaknesses 100%, and if I can surround myself with people who are better than me in a specific area, a genius in their respective right, I'm going to be better for it. And, so I shared that quote because I think in your culture, having gotten to know you now, that vulnerability allows people to thrive in their own right. Because no, maybe your paralegal or whomever isn't good at doing marketing stuff, but he or she is really good at doing the research and the legwork. Well, I think it's important for leaders to let that person to thrive in that area. And if they're not, find a position where they can thrive, because we all have something that we truly excel at. And so anyway,
Right. No, and I think you're hitting it. I think you're hitting the nail right on the head, because, as leaders, you have to take time to, one, self-reflect, but two, identify what you need to succeed. And so I know I've tried to take a lot of time to figure out, what do I need around me? Who do I need around me? Right? I need a certain type of personality around me to help me succeed.
mhm.
And I think that's important, for leaders to know who they are, what they want to accomplish, but then surround themselves by people who force them to be great. Because, like you said, work your strengths, hire your weaknesses.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I think that's critical.
Yeah. This has been good stuff, man. I think we've been going for about 40 minutes, and I do want to keep going, but I want to be cautious of, people staying engaged and tuning. And so I just say, maybe if you and I both can leave one parting thought, I'll start with you. If there's one thing that, if people have made it to this point in our Zoom session, if there's one thing that you would want someone to do, focus on, think about, or implement even in their own life going forward from this point, with all the protests that are going on in the world and all the coronavirus that still is, I mean, in Florida here, I think they're talking about coronavirus even more. So if there's one thing that you want people to, again, think, do, or implement in their lives that help them come out the other side positive, what would that parting thought be?
Wow, Adam, that's deep, man. One thing I think the one thing I would like to share is that people should just ask themselves is how do they find success in the struggle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just chop it up right there. How do you find success in the struggle? Because the struggle that people were dealing with of COVID-19 also presents opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we find success in the struggle? The struggle that my professor, academic advisor gave me also propelled me to this point, right? So how to find success in the struggle. So that's what my last parting thought would be, how to find success in the struggle. And I would just add to that, that the obstacle is the way.
I
So
love that.
how
I
about
love
you,
that.
Adam? What would you say?
Yeah. So I would say just do one thing to get better. Sometimes we believe that we have to accomplish it all today. That like my business has to turn around today. That I need $10 million today. And maybe in some cases, like the Delta Airlines of the world, they do need 10 million today. Because I read something where they were burning through like $50 million a day because the flights were still operating, and obviously the government has helped and stepped in. But I think we can overwhelm ourselves with how far we get to go and not focus on just winning the day. So what I've been trying to do throughout these times is just do one thing every day to get just a little bit better. And sometimes that one thing is picking up the phone and calling someone who maybe I haven't talked to in a while, who I know could help me, but maybe I've been fearful of reaching out because I'm like, I don't want them to think that I'm just using them right now for a business opportunity. But I've made that call. And some other days it might just be going for a long run when I don't feel like running, because that for me is mental clarity and mental well-being. So the short answer again is just do one thing every day that gets you better or your business better. If it gets you better, it's inevitably going to get your business better, I believe. But this has been awesome stuff, man. I look forward. We talked about this. Obviously, we're going to continue to try to do this, and you and I can talk offline. But again, for the viewers who may be tuning in, when Edward and I post this, blast it out on social media, we'll include our email addresses and phone numbers. And if we can assist in any way, of course, with Edward's legal expertise, you might have more pressing needs for folks, who are looking for legal advice and so forth. But I've loved this, man, and we'll talk about how we can keep going and put more content out in the world.
This sounds great. I hope everybody enjoyed this. If you have any questions or comments, please, chat, fill out the comment thing. We're just trying to inspire, right? We're just trying to make the world a better place. You turn on the TV, you can see all kind of negativity, right? You turn on Adam James and you'll see positivity. And so I want to be with Adam James and some positive light to see in the world, okay? Best wishes to everybody. Just remember to make the rest of your life the best of your life and to live life to the fullest.
Love that. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Edward. Good to see you, brother.
All right.